Residential Life for Students with Autism, presented by Nathan Billings and Vanessa Dominguez, Disability Resource Center. Next slide. Objectives. What is ASD? Why is autism awareness important? What struggles do ASD students face? What can residential life do to help? Campus and community resources. Questions. Next slide. What is autism? Autism spectrum disorder is an umbrella term for several neurological disorders characterized by impairments in social interaction, delayed or deficient communication, restricted repetitive and stereotyped patterns of behavior. Next slide. The ASD student. What should we be looking for? Every individual on the spectrum is completely unique. They may use odd and sometimes offensive phrases, awkward gestures, or gait. They may show reduced or no eye contact. They may have sensitivity to noise, light, clothing, internal and external stimuli. They may have stereotyped and repetitive motor mannerisms. Next slide. The ASD student. What should we be looking for? Emotional issues, such as angry outbursts and meltdowns. Learning issues, such as misunderstood assignments, getting, quote, parts but missing the, quote, whole, slow to process. Exceptionally bright, especially in areas of interest where the student with ASD tends to be hyper-focused. Asperger's. May have perfectionist tendencies. Black and white thinking. Next slide. An example of black and white thinking. This is a diagram of a triangle with the X denoting the hypotenuse. The directions are to find X. The X is circled with an arrow pointing to it in the words, "Here it is." Next slide. Myths versus reality. People with ASD lack empathy. False. People with autism sometimes have difficulty expressing emotions. Myth. People with ASD fidget when restless. False. Behaviors serve a purpose. People with ASD tend to be highly intellectual. True. Students on the spectrum often have unique gifts and potential for societal impact. Next slide. Why is autism awareness important? Increased enrollment in college, particularly in STEM fields. DRC ASD enrollment has increased 800% since 2008. There's an increased number of autism diagnoses nationally. It's the fastest growing developmental disability. 1990s disabilities increased 16%. 1990s autism increased 172%. Currently 1 in 88 births in the U.S. Next slide. This slide is a graph showing autism prevalence on the rise. There has been a 600% increase in prevalence over the last 2 decades. In 1975, the prevalence was 1 in 5,000. In 2009, it was all the way up to 1 in 110. Next slide. Challenges of college life. Doing well academically, getting good grades. Making friends, getting along with others. Being away from home and family. Establishing an identity. Physical health and well-being, such as eating and sleeping. Managing chores, such as laundry, errands, cleaning room. Setting goals, both short-term and long-term. Managing time, balancing activities. Next slide. Qualities of a successful student. Time management. Organized. Uses technology wisely. Healthy, balanced lifestyle. Leadership and teamwork. Understands their strengths and weaknesses. Next slide. Qualities of a successful student continue. Socially connected, shows up, sets goals, thinks critically, self-discipline. The 3 R's: respect, responsibility, resourcefulness. Next slide. Causes of failure in college: not understanding the amount of work required, other activities, wrong major, poor communication skills, lack of effort, motivation, failure to assume responsibility, lack of ability and/or poor high school preparation. Next slide. Typical path of new students with AS. Special ed is all done. No more disability, parentheses, perceived. I want to be like everyone else, in parentheses, chose to not utilize accommodations. Stress. I am overwhelmed. Anxiety, possibly increased obsessions and/or behaviors. What's wrong with me? Depression, isolation. Crash, withdrawal, shutdown. Cleaning up, quote, the mess. Lost time, money, resources, academic probation, maybe irreparable damage. Then hopefully, maybe I do need support. Next slide. Scheduling. Routine is good. Often, a lack of scheduling planning can be the start to a downward spiral. Advise student to keep a familiar schedule. Change to college schedule may be a huge adjustment. Organization aids and reminders are useful. Whiteboard with no more than 3 daily reminders. Next slide. Room assignments and setup. Single room versus roommate. Some parents would prefer their children to have a roommate so that they will have a friend. Roommates are often not friends. Room setup can be very important to students with autism. Family may want to be involved in room setup before the move-in. Sensory integration dysfunction. Overstimulation is a major problem. Lights, music, uncomfortable furniture, and fire alarms are examples. This is often the reason for requesting single room. Next slide. Managing breakdowns. Crisis management. Identify stressors and triggers. Have a plan. Use calming methods. Medications. Resident advisors may need to be aware of medication. Students sometimes struggle to remember medication. Next slide. Examples of stressors that can trigger students with ASD. The seat you usually sit in is taken when you get to class. You have to look for a different parking spot every day. They are out of the foods you eat when you get to the dining hall. You are called upon in class to discuss a reading with a student next to you. The professor has left a note on the classroom door explaining that class will be held in an alternative building today. Next slide. Policies and procedures. Students with autism must be made aware of Student Conduct Code. Disability is not an excuse for breach of conduct. Rules and authority figures should be clearly spelled out. Create a rules sheet. Create social and residential life reminders. Be specific and concrete. Scripts for fire drills and lockdowns. Next slide. When working with students with ASD, remember consistency, structure, and predictability. Use special interests or fascinations whenever possible. Find their hook. Visuals remain constant. Words do not. What's obvious to you is not to someone with ASD. Be clear and direct in communication. Say what you mean what you say. Provide big picture and details. Why are we doing what we are doing? Don't assume what's in your head is in theirs. Check it out. If you have met one person with ASD, you have only met one person with ASD. Next slide. Campus and community references. Disability Resource Center, Building 124. Nathan Billings and Vanessa Dominguez. Phone number 805-756-1395. DRC Peer Mentor Program and the DRC Connections Club geared for ASD. Health and Counseling Services. Counseling, phone number 805-756-2511. Pulse's Real Team geared toward mental health. Central Coast Autism Spectrum Center. Email contact@autismspectrumcenter.com. Phone number 805-763-1100. Kim Richards, 805-543-5060. Dr. Bobby Tehrani, psychologist, 805-409-8239. Address 1411 Marsh Street, Suite 201, San Luis Obispo, California, 93401. Dr. Julie Daggett, PhD. Phone number 805-801-9972. Address 1411 Marsh Street, Suite 202, San Luis Obispo, California, 93401. Next slide.